So, welcome everybody. I'm going to give you an update on what's happening in the Message Center area. Specifically, I'm hitting the high points. As you know, there's always a lot of information that is being updated, changed, and new coming out in the Message Center. So I'm going to give you some highlights, some things to think about as we're going through and seeing new things coming out in your organization. So starting off with, we're going to start off on the Outlook side of things. There's going to be some changes happening to the scheduling assistant, and this is going to be for the Windows, the new Windows version, right? The Outlook for Windows and the web versions, right? So we're not talking classic. This is going to be happening here. I believe actually the dates are wrong. Sorry about that. That should be still happening here in July. But it's really about the accessibility. So they came out and literally said, yeah, it's not as good. We're making some changes accessibly wise to make it easier to be able to read. Things like, and let me get my pointer here. You'll notice that like the attendees in there, it's going to talk about with you selecting a particular date or time, it's going to automatically update and say, hey, this person's available. This is not, this is tentative at this point, just based off of their calendar. You'll also see things like the availability view overall, large grouping, like, hey, these are the spots that everybody's available, these are not. The grid view is going to give more better free busy information that's going to be sitting here. It's easier to read. And things like time zone behavior is going to be easier to be able to read and be able to just literally get those scheduled faster without having to decipher what you're seeing. With this change, though, make sure that you're notifying your end users. That's happening. Let's jump to Planner, which we haven't talked about much. This is actually more on the e-discovery side. So here in early July to mid-July, so happening currently, there's going to be some changes in the Planner side of things where you're going to be able to then have Purview to e-discovery to be able to pull information in. Purview admin is going to have this capability. They're going to be able to do content search on the Planner information, as you see in the screenshot. So I can literally see what's going on from that Planner. You can do legal holds is necessary. And by the way, this is on by default. So there's nothing you have to do to be able to make that happen. But just make sure you're notifying your internal Purview admins of this change. All right, let's move to the SharePoint side of things. So on the SharePoint side, this is going to be really the content area or the content pane on the far right as you're working on that page. This is getting a major update. Starting here in July and going into August, targeted and worldwide release here late July to late August. What's going to happen is that everything's going to be consolidated into this area. You're going to get some icons on the right-hand side that's going to allow you to be able to jump from your tools to more configuration or edit property of those pieces. So it's easier to do it without having to click in and out and go from there, right? So you are able to do things like click and drag your web parts from this content area. It's just going to be a little bit easier to be able to work on these pages and get it the way you want to. And by the way, they're also throwing design ideas in there too. So a little bit of that AI piece is to be able to help you guys out like you're kind of used to in PowerPoint and some of those tools as well. So that's coming here shortly. OneDrive is going to get a change to the shared folder experience. And this could throw some of your end users off just because of this change, where prior to this, when somebody opened up a shared folder, right? So you got access to a shared folder, what it would do is it would open up in their OneDrive location. That's changing. So in this case, instead of in that their OneDrive, right, you'll see the URL change. In this case, now it's going to be taken to the people area down in here, and then you're going to see those shared experiences happening in that, right? So it's going to be a different way of looking at it. It's not really going to, they're still going to get their content. It's just they may seem a little confused when it goes from one place to another. So make sure you're letting people know that that has changed or will be changing here late July to late August. Another thing that's going to be changing specifically when we're talking about Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, and this is going to be able to do more defined permissions within these documents specifically. And there's a preview coming out here mid-July to late July, so you might want to check this out ahead of time, but in GA in September, so you got a little bit of time. This is really wrapped around where you have sensitivity labels or information rights management set up in your organization. Understand that that dialog box is going to come up and you are able to then say, who is that viewer, restricted editor, and so on and so forth. Understand, though, that some of the terminology may have changed, right? So reviewer is now restricted editor, right? So that's a terminology change you got to keep in mind. Co-author is now an editor, and co-owner is now owner, right? So anybody who is an owner, doesn't matter if it's a co-owner or the original owner of that document, they're all considered owner in that case. So again, if you have sensitivity labels set up or if you're using IRM, please make note of this, test this out during preview, see how things are going to change a little bit, and then make sure you document that and get that out to your end users. Another thing, again, throwing some people off, they're like, well, why is that icon different? So as you guys know, we moved from classic teams to new teams. And you got the new button, right, that new icon on there for a very long time. And guess what? Eventually, that's going to go away here in mid-July. The other piece, too, is that, classic teams is unsupported at this point as of July 1st, as of last week, Monday. So those organizations that are running classic teams, there is good documentation in the Message Center post. And make sure that you understand when you have to make sure everything's flipped over, what's going to happen. By the way, your end users are going to get bugged by, hey, by the way, Classic Teams is not here anymore. So make sure that you are on top of that. They can dismiss that, but it will come back again, just so you know. And then that new label is going to get removed here fairly quickly. All right. Another feature that is coming out, which I kind of like, we've been using it here inside Microsoft a little bit, is the automatic detecting and hiding inactive channels. I don't know about you, but my Teams is pretty packed. I got a lot of stuff that is sitting out there, and I don't need to always see anything if I'm not interacting with it, but I still want to have access to it, right? So being able to hide some of those channels is important to be able to do that. So what this is going to do is it will use AI to be able to go in and then automatically detect and then hide any channels that you are not going into and doing anything in. This is going to be on by default, and you will be able to disable that at the client level, right, by going into team settings, chats and channel, and then toggle hide inactive channels at that point. Make sure this is documented. By the way, when they get this feature, it'll automatically do the pop-up. So if you notice in here, you'll see a little pop-up window saying, hey, by the way, we're hiding stuff. Click here to find out what we're hiding. And it will be able to go in and you can see everything that's hiding at that point. Obviously, if it's not something that you want hidden, you can uncheck that, right, and go from there and make sure it's shown. But it's going to be, I think it's going to be a good way to be able to help your users get cleaned up a little bit. Like, make sure that it's not all those notifications happening all the time. So, yeah, Brian, yeah. So expect users to complain that they no longer have channels. That's exactly what's going to happen. So that's why this is very important to make sure that you let them know this is happening by default, right? All right. Another thing, and get a lot of these types of scenarios where I'm on a channel and I like a lot of the information that's in there, but I just don't want to have maybe one of those posts in there, and I don't want all those notifications happening. Maybe it's pretty chatty. Maybe I don't want to have any, I don't even deal with that particular conversation. So I want to turn off notifications for that particular post in that channel. That's coming out here, targeted in early July to mid-July, GA mid-July to late July, and then GA for GCC and the government side of things, late July to early August, right? So that's something that's going to start off with the Teams desktop on Windows and on Mac. And by the way, it's enabled by default. You go into the ... for that post, and you can turn off those notifications there. Again, just cleaning up all that stuff that comes, those notifications that come across on Teams. All right, so another thing that's getting a little bit of a revamp is the whole search experience when you're looking for something. So that whole, hey, I'm typing, I want to find specific either a message or maybe I'm looking for a file, right? That whole experience is getting an upgrade. And so here targeted early July, so it's happening now to mid-July and then going to be mid-July to late July when it's everybody is going to have availability to this. So being able to see the search scopes, just an easier way to be able to find it. You notice the things, your scopes are going to be up here very easily. You'll see that they're segmented also in my search results as I'm looking for it. So if I wanted to just do files, I can go to those files and the ones that are recently touched by members of my team or myself, I will see that information there. And I could always view all search results. So if I'm not seeing what I'm looking for, I can expand that, right? So you're going to get a lot more details than what you've had before in your Microsoft Teams search specifically. Now, one of the features that we're doing more, we being Microsoft specifically, is really focusing on being able to work in a hybrid scenario. That means you're mostly working remote, but then your company's mandated that you're coming into the office maybe 3 days a week, but you don't necessarily have a cubicle or a location that you normally use, right? So being able to have something what's called bookable desks is a concept that's, not just a Microsoft, but it's across all of the whole hybrid work type scenarios. So this feature is coming out where Teams will recognize certain things like you're in the office. Hey, by the way, I see you're in the office. Do you have a desk? Hey, I see that you plugged into this. Let me make sure it's reserved for you. Those types of things are going to start happening with these features that are coming out here early August to late August, right? And keep this in mind. And if your IT organization hasn't started looking at this, there are ways to be able to group those devices and then be able to manage and get all the analytics through the Teams Room Pro management portal. So that's one way that they can then manage all those pieces in there. And they can set up things like automatic location updates within that, that space that you happen to be set up. This is happening. There's nothing that an admins need to do, but as far as the experience and what's happening, there's going to be some training that's going to need to take place for your end users as this is happening. Right, so keep that in mind. All right, some quick mentions that I do want to bring out a couple of these. The first one is the whole publish to Power BI retires starting August 19th. So that piece is happening. So it's in Microsoft Excel where you have this ability to publish to Power BI. That is not going to be an option going forward. If you already have on spreadsheets that are already set up to be able to do that, then don't worry about it. They will continue on from there. There's going to be there's other ways that you take that spreadsheet, you bring them into Power BI or even Microsoft Fabric to be able to get that data in there and then use it within Power BI. But this capability is going away in August 19th of this year. Some other pieces, if you are a security person, Microsoft Preview Portal enters GA. So there's a new portal for Purview so that you can get around easier. So there's nice updates on that. One place to get to everything. There is a change on the Teams Town Hall and webinar piece that's happening. And this is the lobby experience for external presenters. Previously to this, and what's happening, it's actually coming out right now, is, and I've had this happen. I've run a lot of webinars for some of the things I do internally, and if we've had an external presenter come in, we need to make sure that they get in early so that we can make sure that they're a presenter. With this change, what's going to happen is that all those who are designated external and they do not have necessarily Teams, right, federated Teams or an authenticated Teams account, then they will automatically go into the lobby. From there, as an organizer or co-organizer, I'm able to then bring them in and then make sure they're a presenter from that way. That way they're separated out from all the attendees. So it's a lot easier to be able to manage those particular accounts. Customize things like the order of webinar presenters on an events page is coming out here in early July, targeted, and then GA worldwide mid-July. This is really, again, for the webinars, and specifically if you're utilizing public access for that particular webinar, gives you the ability to be able to drop and drag the presenters so you can have them in a specific order on that registration page. Excel and PowerPoint, Word are going to be getting some enhancements, and this is going to be a change. You're going to want to make sure your end users know about this. They're changing the file area to make it a little bit more intuitive to be able to do things with that file. You know, say to copy, download those pieces. And by the way, to easily rename that file, there's no other way to do this. This is go right into the title bar, make that change there, and it'll automatically update. And again, this is for the web version of these. And that's something I had to get used to once that started getting deployed internally. I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. Now I have to make sure that I remember that's the way I'm using it. Additionally, view attachments and invitations created in MS Outlook in Teams. So when I get an Outlook invitation and somebody had embedded a Word document or Excel, I would have to open it up in Outlook. However, now that's coming across. So I don't have to go back in Outlook and look. I can look at it within my Teams calendar and just open that attachment from there. We're getting some search filters for Outlook. Specifically, when I'm going into search, you'll see a bar that has more options to be able to quickly get into. And again, this is the new version, Outlook version, or even the web version. But I can do attachments. I can quickly get at those things that I may want to be able to see without having to search through the toolbar to find that information. Additionally, calling out, make sure you look at this one. The web links in new Outlook will open side by side in the email. So if I have something that's an attachment and I open it up and it goes into my browser in Edge, you'll actually get the side-by-side view, which some people like, some people don't. That's something that you can then change the behavior if you don't like that. And then Progressive Web App, which has been available for Linux for a while, is now going to be available for Windows and Mac OS for those organizations that are using PWAs for deploying their Office tools. Updated, there's a lot of updates. A couple ones that I do want to mention. Offline mode for OneDrive for web got pushed back to late August as opposed to late June for doing it. So if you haven't seen this, this is that offline mode for OneDrive. So you can take your files and take them offline even if you're in the browser. This one, I have a lot of customers that are looking forward to this one, the shorter meeting URLs. That got pushed back a ways. Like we're talking back into the November, December, and January in 2025 date range, right? This is taking that meeting URL and shrinking it so it's not that very long, ungodly email link that you see currently. That'll be helpful, but again, it got pushed back a little bit. Couple other things, delegate access to Microsoft Copilot dashboard in the Viva Insights. And we talked about that a little bit in our previous sessions, talking about this is a great way to be able to see that adoption from a Microsoft Copilot side of things. And you're going to get access to that in the Viva Insights area. That's got pushed back just a little bit from mid-July to from late June to mid-July, right? So it's happening pretty soon here. So make sure that you're looking at that. And then things like integrated chat features with meeting RSVPs, being able to follow meetings as opposed to having to yes, no, and maybe, right? I still want to follow that. I still want to get updates if that's the case. That got changed. Notice the timelines on there. And then from an admin action, the only one that a couple I really want to focus on is the number one is that Power BI retiring for older browsers. That's a new one, September 1st. Make sure you take a look at that message center post for that specifically. And it tells you what the latest versions of that. And then don't forget about the whole Teams live event retirement that was supposed to happen September 30th. However, that got delayed. Now there is not an end date on it. So Teams live event is still going to be available for organizations to use. However, highly suggest look into the town hall teams event feature just so that you can be ready for that. If you still need to use Teams Live event, go ahead. And I think those are the highlights for today. Michelle, I think it's going to be back to you.
All right. All right, sounds good. Although anyone using Delve on the web, that's retiring too. So
Oh, that's right.
plan
Yes.
for that.
I don't know. I think everybody's stopped using Delve with everything else going on, right?
I don't know. There could be Delve lovers out there.
Maybe there's a raise of hands. Maybe thumbs up. Who's still using Delve? Oh, I got one.
All right.
We got one. All right. Well, December 16th, man. Watch
That's
out.
why we cover the Message Center.
That's right.
You never know what you're going to find. Thanks, Don.
Absolutely.